Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. Fantasy football draft season is upon us, and as you're getting ready for draft day, one of the most important things is how you value players, right? You don't want to be too high or too low on anyone. So I'm going to tell you right now, 5 players who you're probably too high on draft day. They're being drafted just simply too early. Too early. We're going to start, well, I think every quarterback is drafted too early. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that already. But one really stands out, and that's Deshaun Watson. Are we really drafting this guy as the number 2 quarterback off the board? Ahead of Tom Brady, ahead of Carson Wentz, ahead of Drew Brees, ahead of Ben Roethlisberger. Are we really doing that? We are. Why are we doing that? Well, I think a lot of people are overvaluing a small sample size. Remember, we go back to last year. He only played half a season, and he really only put up big fantasy numbers in 5 games. That's it, and 4 of them were against bad defenses. Now, he has a favorable schedule this year, but ultimately, as the 2nd quarterback off the board, we are overvaluing Deshaun Watson. We could set ourselves up for some disappointment. I still think he's a quarterback 1, but I have him ranked 8 on my board, not 2. Next up, Jordan Howard. Yes, he's had 1,000 yards in each of his first 2 seasons in the NFL, but remember, it is a different offense there this year. So here's the thing. You go from John Fox to Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy's offense is an Andy Reid offense, which means they're going to prioritize pass catchers out of the backfield. Over the last 2 years, no running back has more drops than Jordan Howard. He's been one of the worst pass-catching running backs in the league. So be careful to not overvalue him. And again, I'm not saying don't draft this guy. What I'm saying is don't draft him where he's going. He's going in the late 2nd, early 3rd round. I'm more comfortable with him in the late 3rd, early 4th. So remember, you're setting your values accordingly. That means that you may not get him, but you don't need him. All you need is value with every single pick on draft day. Next up on my list, Derrick Henry. We'll stick at the running back position. Derrick Henry is often going as one of the top 20 running backs off the draft boards right now, and that is just too early for this guy. Yes, he is a monster of a human being. Yes, he has upside, but here's the problem in that Tennessee Titans offense. They brought in Dion Lewis. So this is really ultimately what you're going to see is a lot of inconsistency from week to week in terms of who is it going to be? Is it going to be Lewis this week or Henry? Game script is going to set that up, and that leads to a lot of unpredictability. So it can be very frustrating to own players in full-blown committees like that, where it is largely not a 50-50 split. We expect Henry to be more of the early down back and Lewis to be more of the passing down back. But with those touches uneven that way, it's going to be frustrating. So be careful to not overvalue Derrick Henry. He's more of a borderline RB2 than a top 20 guy on my board. Next up on the list, Jimmy Graham. Okay, yeah, he had 10 touchdowns last year. And Jimmy Graham has been a fantasy mainstay for the last decade, really, at the tight end position. But it's not like he had a 1,000-yard season. You know, like we saw out of Gronk and Kelsey last year. He didn't put up a lot of yards at all in Seattle. And yes, he is with Aaron Rodgers, but touchdowns are harder to predict than yards and targets at tight end, wide receiver, etc. They're so much harder to predict, and we see so much more variance from year to year. So if you simply expect Jimmy Graham to go out and score 10 touchdowns, which he could, but he could also go out and score 4 touchdowns or 5. If you're going to be touchdown dependent in terms of fantasy scoring, typically you're going to be disappointed with the results. Jimmy Graham going in the 5th round, typically going ahead of guys like Greg Olsen and Delanie Walker, who are going to see more volume, who are potentially going to put up more yards than Jimmy Graham. Don't overvalue Jimmy Graham on draft day. Finally, Kenny Golladay coming in on this list here. All right, I get it. It's a sexy name, but you know what? Tell me this, how many times have you won your league by putting a sticker on the board and getting oohs and ahs from your draft mates, right? People in your league may love the pick, but ultimately sexy picks don't win fantasy leagues. Points win fantasy leagues. And here's the problem with Kenny Golladay. I love Kenny Golladay. Don't get me wrong there. I'm not knocking him as a player, but you have Marvin Jones and Golden Tate solidified as the 1 and 2 there. And those are the guys who are going to see the targets. When you're talking about 3rd receivers in the NFL, you could get occasional big weeks out of them. Hey, he may win somebody $1 million in DFS. But on a week-to-week consistent basis, he's just simply not going to see enough targets to sustain fantasy value. I mean, what do you think you're ultimately going to get with Kenny Golladay? 3 or 4 touchdowns? you're not going to get a lot out of him, unfortunately. So if you draft him ahead of guys who are number 2s, guys in the later rounds who you can get as number 2s on their teams, you're probably going to be disappointed. So Watson, Howard, Henry, Graham, and Galladay are my guys that you're probably drafting a little bit too early. Who do you think you're drafting too early? Who's overvalued in fantasy drafts right now? Tell us in the comments below. Of course, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos. And go check out all the fantasy football goodness at ProFootballFocus.com.